This is Future X.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Future X webinar. My name is Ever Gonzalez. I am the co-founder of Future X and the founder of Outlier HQ. Thank you for being with us. On tonight's conversation with Jaime Casap, we're going to be discussing whether people of color should be owning their own world and what that means. This can be a great discussion and we're glad you're here. Now, before we jump into it, I want to officially introduce my business partner, Lee Schneider. Lee, welcome.
Thanks. I just wanted to give a brief intro. What is Future X for those who are new to it? Ever and I got this idea of looking at the future through a lot of different lenses. So the usual way of doing it is science fiction, and we've got involved in a few science fiction podcasts. And there's also the sort of techie side of it. But we started thinking more about the social fabric and people and how people get along and what does that future look like. So this particular episode of this, if you'll call it that, is really about that, looking at humans and how humans are working their world, not so much the tech side of the future, but the people side of the future.
I love it. Now, this you brought up Jaime to be a great person for this particular topic. Why Jaime? Why now? Why this discussion?
Well, Jaime, who's going to give his own introduction for himself in a moment, he's been a leader in the education space, and he's seen tech from the inside. He's part of the team that launched the Chromebook and the education apps, the things that all our kids are on right now, like my 8-year-old. He's on all this stuff. He's attached to his Chromebook for many hours a day. But Jaime has also seen the world through the eyes of someone outside of Google. He's recently, not so recently, but somewhat recently left Google. And when we're talking about what this should be about, I tossed out diversity, inclusion, and equality. And he came back with inclusion. What about if people of color own their own world? And I said, that's kind of interesting because it reframes the whole game. It reframes everything into validating worlds other than the white world. It takes away the supremacy of the white world, saying, well, the white world is it, everybody, so you got to fit into that. And I thought that was a really interesting thing to get into now, because for all the obvious reasons, there's a lot of focus now on race, on diversity, on trying to fix the problems that have been around for hundreds and hundreds of years in this country and in the world, really. So we thought that Jaime would be a person to push a little bit, to open our minds a little bit, and that's why I thought he would be a great guy to have.
Great, Jaime. We've been following your work for a while now. So let's this is a broad topic. Let's kind of open it up a little bit and dig in. And then as we go, we'll dig in deeper as well. But so have people of color lost control of their own world? And if so, what does that look like? So your thoughts on all of this? You're thinking about inclusion, no inclusion. Let's talk about it.
Right. So thank you guys for having me. First of all, it's exciting to be back. I'm back in my Phoenix studio. I was up in Sedona for a couple of months. Let me do a quick, brief introduction of who I am. I am the former chief education evangelist at Google. I was at Google for 15 years. As Lee mentioned, launched Google Apps for Education into the university space, launched it into K-12. Craziest idea I had was launching Chromebooks into education, launched the Google for Education transformation framework, a bunch of big stuff that I did at Google in the education space. And it started with 2 of us. And it was 2 of us for a very long time. Then it was 5 of us. And then it was 10. And now I couldn't even count the number of people that are part of the education effort at Google. And it was a great experience, obviously. And I learned a lot, not just about being in the education space, but also being in technology at the same time. And for me, where my passion comes from for both those topics of education and technology is my personal background, right? I am a first-generation American, born and raised in Hell's Kitchen, New York, grew up on welfare and food stamps in a really old school Hell's Kitchen from the 70s and 80s. And education is the reason I get to talk to you guys, right? Education is the reason that I've been able to accomplish what I've been able to accomplish. Now, that being said, what I think the opportunity is that we're missing is that I did that without technology, right? My technology was a rotary phone. And if you ask me a question like what happened on December 7th, 1941, and I didn't know, I would say, I'm going to go find out. I'll come back tomorrow, right? And I had to go find that information somewhere. Whether, most people at least had encyclopedias at home where you can find things in the index. I did not have encyclopedias. Actually, that's not true. We had the M, right? Like every year, the sales guy would come by and sell you the M for $9.99. My mother would always get the M. So I had a stack of M's from like 10 years. And so if you ask me an M question, I'd be able to answer it. But I had to go to the library and get information. A building that was closed at 5 o'clock in the afternoon, not open on the weekends, not open after hours. As I just said, it was a limiting thing, and it wasn't just my library; it was everyone's, right? Everyone who lived in that community, and so that is that's not a lot of access to information. And if education is information used intelligently, then the idea that technology can help us in education is an opportunity that we have. And I don't think we're taking advantage of it. So for me, this idea of technology and education at the same time really is just education. Like I'm sure one of the things that I'm trying to get us to the point to talk about this is to not talk about ed tech, right? That's one of those words that we use in the education space. It's just education, right? Nobody ever says car tech or bank tech, right? Or supermarket tech, right? Like it's just the supermarket. You just go shopping. You don't go shopping tech, right? Like it's not ed tech. It's just education. And so this idea of using technology in education in a way that's powerful, especially for kids that are growing up like me who don't have access to encyclopedias and libraries and those things, where they have the world's information at their fingertips, can go a long way, right? So that sets the stage of what I am passionate about, what I care about. Now, that being said, we're having a lot of discussions today about this whole idea of diversity and inclusion and empowerment and giving voice to and listening. And the way I think about it is this way. The Latino market is a $1 trillion market. The African American market is a $1 trillion market. There's enough market there to build things for, right? Like you don't need to empower me. I don't need your power. I don't even like the word empowerment, right? Empowerment means you have power that you're giving to me. No, thank you. I'll make my own power, right? And so this idea of, taking those two markets and saying who's building products and services, who knows those markets better than African Americans and Latinx people, right? Like to build products and services. It doesn't mean that you exclude other groups. It just means that is a target group. So for example, a Latina in Miami who's a coffee expert might have a different flavor of what a Starbucks would look like if she started a chain of coffee houses, right? It might look different. Doesn't mean that only Latin people can go to that restaurant or that coffee shop. It just means it's a different perspective, a different flavor. And so when I talk to students, especially students who are growing up like me, I tell them that who they are and where they come from, that's their competitive advantage, that they don't need to go fit into another world. They just have to own their world, be proud of where they come from, and figure out how to solve those problems, whether those problems are consumer problems or societal problems, whatever those problems are, they can help solve those problems. And so we're in this space now where everyone's like, let's give people of color voice. No, just give me a laptop and get out of my way, right? Like there's enough stuff out there where we can build whatever we want and serve the markets. And like a Google, and this isn't, I'm not talking, out of school here, their diversity rates are atrocious, right? They have 5-6%, Latinx representation. And I think they count all of Google. So that means salespeople and marketing people. It doesn't mean just engineers, but when we get to discussing AI and artificial intelligence and machine learning, who's coding that? Who's programming that? And if it's not people of color involved in that, then we have a problem, right? And so when I talk to students about who say to me, hey, how do I get a job at Google? My response is, F Google, go build something, go do something, and let Google buy you, right? Because what we need in these communities isn't jobs. We need wealth. We need change makers. We need influence, right? So even this idea of what we talk about in K-12, which is college and career ready. Let's get our kids college and or career ready. And why is a job what we're shooting for? You can take every Black and Latino person in downtown Phoenix and get them jobs and nothing changes. We don't need jobs. We need opportunity. We need funding, right? We need education. We need those things so that we can build our own things, not so that, we're lucky enough that you can fit us in your world. That's the beauty of where we are today. Anyone with a laptop can pick up a laptop and start a business. And we're not taking advantage of that.
I'm glad you started this way, because obviously it makes sense. Anybody that's listening is I'm assuming they're nodding their head because of what you're saying. So is the problem the phrasing then? I mean, maybe it's just the webinar or our approach, because when I told a few people, when I invited a few people to come on and listen, the whole theme is, what if people of color own their own world? Automatically the woke community or some of these other communities are like, whoa, wait, what are we talking about here? That's more, it's dividing us instead of getting us together. So
I hear that a lot. I hear that idea of, it's just segregating. Okay, cool. When you stop segregating, we'll stop segregating. How about that? Right? Like I don't understand that problem. It's not about that, right? It's this idea that these are markets out there that when you go to a supermarket, this is one of my favorite things. I live in downtown Phoenix, and you go to a supermarket, you go to Safeway, you go to Bashas'. They have what's called a Hispanic aisle, right? It's like 3 shelves of Spanish food, right? Everybody in the store is LatinX, but they have 3 shelves of Spanish food. That's what I'm talking about. Like, why is it the whole supermarket Spanish food? Because that's the majority of people. I once went to go, so I started a school called the Phoenix Coding Academy. And I would go recruit. So I would go talk to students, 8th grade students' parents at these assemblies and get-togethers. And this one time I went in, and there were, 30 parents in there. The majority of the parents were Latin, and they had an interpreter speaking speaking Spanish as the presenter would speak. And then it was my turn. I got up and I started speaking in English. And I'm like, wait, what am I doing? You know what? Why don't you interpret for the 2 white people sitting there? And so I started speaking in Spanish, and he interpreted what I was saying in Spanish into English to the 2 people out of the 30 people who were white. It's an attitude. It's a view. And this is, what's great. Go to, visit Miami. Miami is one of those great cities that is Latin based, right? It eats it. I remember walking by 4 cops, 4 of them standing in the corner, all of them speaking Spanish. Every store has Spanish signs in it. Like, it's just, they embraced it. So what I want isn't to be heard, or I don't need to be empowered. I need opportunity, and then I need you to get out of the way, right? And so one of the things that I'm trying to do is find great ideas that are out there for whatever market they want to build for, and then find opportunity to help them build their business cases, to help them build their pitch decks, to be able to find investors that can invest in the person, not the idea, because they're not going to get the idea, right? So if you have an African-American in South Chicago who has this amazing idea of a hip hop clothing line, what investor living in Palo Alto is going to know anything about that, right? That's what I'm talking about, is those opportunities. So what we need to do is get people like me in between those people to say, hey, this idea is a master idea. You trust me, so trust me. This is going to be a great idea, and do more of that, right? It's let us empower you to be more open to seeing different ways of doing things and different ideas.
So up until this point, you must have received some pushback to some of your ideas, right? I mean, do you spend time and talk them through it, or do you just kind of push them aside and be like, I'm just follow me if you want. If not, get out of my way. This is going to happen no matter what.
Right. No, well, I guess what it comes down to is I hear the argument of that's just going to create more segregation, right? If you're going to create, Cuban themed coffee shops, that's just going to segregate people. And the idea is, I don't understand the argument. Is the argument like Starbucks just has to include some empanadas? Like, I don't know what the argument is, right? Like, what is the argument? The argument is, no, we got this. We'll throw in some cookies for you. Like, I don't get it. Like, build the Cuban themed coffee houses, and Starbucks is going to see it and buy it, right? And so that's what I'm talking about. It's not, the integration will happen through capitalism, right?
Agreed.
The integration will happen through consumers where they spend their money. All I'm saying is that, you got a 20%, African American and 20% basically Latinx population, and go pick up any product or service, pick up anything and see who it's built for, right? And so who's building stuff for them?
I like it. You've spent some time at Google. Now you're not there. You have a little bit, I'm assuming, a little bit more time on your hands. I mean, is this your number one priority? Is this what you're trying to work on now? Because you have a lot of different choices.
Yeah. No, I'm working on a couple. It's funny, on my YouTube channel, I haven't posted a video in 2 months because I kind of took some time off to regroup, right? When you're somewhere for 15, like I spent some time this summer or the last couple months thinking about what 15 years ago was, right? And I like things like Blockbuster was still a thing, like Blu-rays had just started, right? Like you would go to Blockbuster and there'd be one shelf of Blu-rays, everything else was a disc. Blackberries was how we communicated. Those were, everybody wanted the buttons. You couldn't get, no, I don't want a phone without buttons. All my phones have to have buttons. Like 15 years ago is a long time. So I took some time off, but the last video I posted was a response to what people asked me about leaving Google, which was, what's next? What's the next thing? And just like, I don't think that we should be worried about jobs per se, that we should be worried about problems, right? So that's what I say all the time, which is we shouldn't ask students what they want to be when they grow up. We should ask them what problem they want to solve, right? And then ask them how they want to solve it. And that's really what it comes down to. What's the problem that you want to solve? And how do you, with your flavor, your perspective, your gifts, your talents, want to solve that problem? Because there's a million ways to solve a problem. And I don't know why we think that there's only 10, right? And so what is that person as an individual's way that they want to solve that problem? And then what do you need to know to solve that problem? And what I talk to students about is that you have everything at your fingertips. You have literally the world at your fingertips. You know what research is out there, what videos are out there, who's solving that problem now? How can you can this idea that you can learn anything, right? We talked a little bit about my YouTube channel and videography and how I knew nothing about shooting videos, and now I'm shooting videos, and it's literally a choice that we make, right? So when I talk to adults and they say to me, I'm not very creative, or they'll say, I'm not good with technology. I'm just not good with technology. My response is always, this is why I don't have a lot of friends, but my response is, no, you've chosen not to be creative. You've chosen not to be good at technology. Everything that you need to know to be good at it is out there. It's just a choice. Just own it, right? And so when I talk to students, I tell them that what's the problem that you want to solve? How do you want to solve it? What do you need to know to solve that problem? And then go start working on it. Now, when you look at it that way, it's not about jobs, it's about building skills. And it might be over one job, might be over 5 jobs, it might be over 10 careers, whatever that is. And the same thing is true on the other side. So for me, what's next wasn't one thing, it was like 10 things. And so that's what I'm currently doing is I'm working, right now I have about 5 different projects that I'm working on that I'm part of, either a couple of days a month or a week a month, but it's 5 or 6 different ones that I'll be announcing soon. But that's how I'm focusing on this. This one is this work stream is another one, which is this idea of how do we get more. Let me start it this way. I can make an assumption, right? I don't get to meet a lot of people like me in positions of influence and power, right? I don't. And I can make one of 2 assumptions. right? Not like me, like my personality, like me with my background and how I grew up. There's just not a lot of people like that. So I can make one of two assumptions. Either I've been able to accomplish what I've been able to accomplish because I am a super genius with a 900 IQ, or there are millions of students who are just like me, who have the same capacity, the same capability, and we're missing out. We're not giving them, it's not about empowering them. It's not about listening to their voice. We're not giving them opportunities in education, opportunities in business, opportunities in funding. And so what I want to do as one of these work streams is find an organization or start an organization. I kind of soft launched this, but this idea of going out and finding talented people and identifying, doing a gap analysis. What are they missing? They have a great, their personality is amazing. They're hard workers and have a great idea. What are they missing? Are they missing a business plan? Are they missing a funding model? What are they missing that we can help them with? And then once they're ready, let's go help them pitch to investors that are in our networks, because those two networks don't ever talk to each other. So let's go find those networks and bring those networks to those communities, those people who have these great ideas. So that's one of the work streams that I'm currently trying to formalize.
And I know you haven't dug in too deep, but I'm assuming with your experience in everything you've done, you do have some data there. What are they missing? Where's that gap?
Yeah, it's usually
on average.
It's usually funding. It's usually money, right? It's this idea of, it's perception, right? It's this idea of, again, an investor says, this is a business case, this is a pitch deck, it has to look like this. And the people who are out there don't grow up in that network, don't grow up in that world. So they don't know how to build it that way. So maybe these people, these investors, have to be a little more open to looking at it in a different way, right? I mean, the same is true in everything, right? So Google hires from the best universities. You know, I went to SUNY Brockport. You know how many graduates from SUNY Brockport work at Google? Well, now no one, right? So this idea that we can open up our perspective to look at ideas and look at things from a different point of view, that maybe there's another Jaime at another SUNY school somewhere out there, that it's not all at Stanford and Harvard and Princeton and all these other schools, that maybe they're at community schools or community colleges, or maybe they're at state schools, and they're talented people. How do we find those talented people for education, for higher ed? How do we find those talented people to be product managers? How do we find those talented people to be entrepreneurs, right? Like that's the goal, that's the mission, right? The best business people I ever met in my life were the big drug kingpins in New York in the 70s and 80s.
Agreed. You know, it's funny, you and I have similar backgrounds, just in different coasts. You're New York, I was LA.
Yeah.
Just with everything that was going on, poor, right? Parents, immigrants. I was actually born in Mexico, 3 years old when we came to the US. And so we didn't have connections. We didn't have a source of like getting us ahead for the most part. But when I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do with my life and seeing that there weren't a lot of opportunities back then, I couldn't join certain clubs. I couldn't get into certain jobs. And so I kind of started my own, right? And so for the most part, I've done my own thing most of my career. Right. Started my own companies, right? Ran my own conferences that I couldn't get into. So I started my own. And I was surprised at the amount of negativity that I got from both sides. From white people, basically, and from other Hispanics as well, other Latinx people, saying to kind of get in line. What do you mean you're succeeding on your own? Don't you want to get in there? And so what was your experience with that?
It's a mentality, right? It's a mindset that needs to shift and change. Look, I'll never forget, like, think about it. The motto of higher education is this, for the good schools, right? It is, little Johnny does well, gets straight A's, right? Which is a nightmare for a poor kid, right? So let's just, only the superstars get to do that. That doesn't mean that the kids who get C's are any dumber than the one kid who gets all A's. But I worked with a lot of these Stanford people, trust me. And let's say they get really good grades. Little Johnny does really well in school. And so we pack him up in the station wagon and we drive him up to State U and we drop him off and we cry when he's at the dorms, right? That's the model that we use. That's a very white model of family, right? in the Latino culture, and I know this because it happened here in Phoenix, right? Some girl got into Princeton, goes to her father and says, hey, I got into Princeton. And father's like, wait, I can't afford, you're not going to Princeton. You're staying here and taking care of your brothers and sisters, right? So how do we bring Princeton to her, right? And so it's this idea of opening up how we think about this so that we're not trying to take people in their culture and try to fit them into a model that is ours, right? That is the majority's world. And my point about this whole idea that we can own our own world is that these are we don't need diversity from a feels good to do kind of perspective. It's a business. This is business. This is $1 trillion businesses, $1 trillion markets, right? And so I think you can take a couple of bucks from $1 trillion market and build something really cool.
Lee, I like how you're kind of in both worlds here, in the private sector as an entrepreneur and business owner, and then in academia as well. What are you seeing out there with your experience at your university?
Well, I teach for USC, and I see it's an interesting shift. I see the professors and people like me who are lecturers really making an effort, and it's hard, to bring examples to our students, and those examples look and sound like our students. Mm-hmm. It's something that we pursue, that I pursue every day, because it's very easy. I wouldn't say lazy, but I'll say easy to just pick all the white people. You know, when you're picking the people for a podcast to be on a podcast, which I do a lot, you know, the white people are there for you. You have to work a little bit harder. Who's your composer? Who's doing the direction? Who's doing the editing? You know, it's a group, it's a cycle that we're in, and it has to be broken. It probably has to be broken on an individual basis. Each person, the faculty retreat is coming up for USC, and I just got a questionnaire to prepare for it. Are you racist? You know, it's kind of like a breakdown of the Ibram Kendi book. Are you racist? How prevalent is systemic racism in school? You know, and I'd read that book, and I had some opinions about that. To turn this around as a question for Jaime, we're looking at something that's systemic and deep and a habit, and not even well examined for most white people. It's like, what are you talking? I don't see race, or I don't know what you're talking about, or Princeton. Sure, anybody who's smart can get into Princeton, you know, like the rebuttals of everything that you said. Sure. So is it that we need a Phoenix Coding Academy in every city? Do we need an intervention with VCs to shake them up? I mean, where does this start? This change that's needed, how does it begin?
Yeah, so I think this is the point, right? It starts with education. Here's the deal, right? Here's the good news. The good news is that machines are going to do a lot of stuff, right? We're at the very, very beginning of digitalization. Very beginning. Like, everyone thinks about technology and what we have in front of us and all this cool stuff, and we think, oh, look how modern and hip we are. We're cavemen compared to what this is going to look like in 20 years, right? And so, you know, as an example, Google had a breakthrough a couple of months before I left on quantum computing. And I can hear your audience tuning out right now and shutting off everything, right? But I'm not going to define quantum computing. But here's the example that I hope resonates. The breakthrough that they had in quantum computing is that they were able to take one of those mathematical equations that when you feed that equation, those that spin forever, and you feed that to a supercomputer, it takes that supercomputer 10,000 years to process that equation, right? The processing power of that. The breakthrough that Google had in quantum computing is that they did it in 300 seconds. 10,000 years versus 300 seconds. That's where we are. Right. And what's the world going to look like when it's 300 seconds on a MacBook? Right. So that's where we're headed. And I believe that here's the other angle on this, which is that the pandemic, digitalization has been coming at us gradually for a very long time. You know, if you think about supermarkets, you know, went from the label gun and the cash register, the scanning machine, to the self-scanning, to the Amazon stores, right? Like a slow, gradual change. The pandemic is going to cause a hockey stick growth in digitalization. And the reason why is because if you're a good COO of any size company and you look at what your company went through during the pandemic, you're looking at your risk factors. What are your biggest risk factors? And in all cases, your biggest risk factor are people, right? Gathering people, putting people in the same room, putting people, people on a call, people who are doing process work or repetitive tasks, whether they're accountants or call centers or factory workers or manufacturing, whatever it is, it's people doing repetitive work. So what you're doing as a COO, if you're good at what you do, is you're like, how can I replace those people as quickly as possible so I don't ever have to have this risk again, right? How do I automate? How do I use machine learning, artificial intelligence to be able to do this in real time so that I don't have to hire these people to do this process work? That's what you're doing. That's smart. So if we're teaching, and this is going to grow like this, right? Supermarkets, there's supermarkets in Singapore or South Korea don't have people in them anymore. It's all automated now. It's all like you check yourself out, right? That's going to be the norm. And that's happening across the board. Like I think about when you go to a store and you give somebody your credit card and they give you a piece of paper and you have to sign it with a pen. How archaic is that, right? Like that seems like, talk about caveman days. That just seems insane that you have to actually take a pen from someone that 10,000 other people touched and sign your name on something, which means nothing. It's a scribbly line on a piece of paper, and somehow this is good. So that all is going away in a relatively quick amount of time. And so if we're teaching skills or we're teaching kids things that machines can do better or will do better, then we're failing them. What we should be doing is doubling down on human skills. Problem solving, collaboration, the ability to learn, the basic, we used to call them 21st century skills. And, I don't call them that anymore because we're 20 years into the 21st century, but those skills. And what's great about that is, given the fact that if you look at most manual labor, it's done by people of color, right? Minority groups. And you look at the fact that machines are coming at us faster than we can even imagine. If we double down, especially in these communities, and really focus on human skills and developing those problem solving, critical thinking, collaboration, the ability to learn those skills, if we really focus on those, imagine what they can do building those skills and using this technology, this digitalization that's coming at us. What are the things that they can build? So I think it's an opportunity.
Well, I want to know how we motivate, because to take an example, Ever sometimes describes himself as a capitalist with a hippie heart, a filthy capitalist with a hippie heart. And in the world of capitalism, usually it's, this thing is, if I need to take action, right? This thing is going to kill me, so I have to stop it from killing me, or I can make a lot of money on this, right. So I'm going to invest. So I know that's a very bleak assessment, but how do we get the cash flow, the pipeline? How do we get that? The ideas are great. So how do we get them happening? How do we get them flowing?
Right. Well, so the way I think about this is we almost need like a group of a vetting institute, right? So for example, I have some friends who are billionaires, and I have some friends who are VCs, and I have some other friends who are investors. And I've built a good reputation with them, right? I know them, and I've heard them say anything that I make, any company I start, they'd fund. They don't even need to know about it. That's a lot of trust. That's a lot of rapport. That's a lot of building of a relationship. Now, if I took that idea, and then said, listen, I'm working with this woman, I'm working with this guy, I'm working with this, African American, I'm working with this Latino, whatever it is, and they have an amazing business idea for a real Mexican food chain that's not white Chipotle, right? Like they're gonna make real Mexican food, right? And they're gonna do it with organic material, and they're just gonna knock it out of the park. They need $3 million to start the 5 stores that they want to launch because they want to do this hard, right? I worked with them, reviewed their business plan. There's others invested. There's other people involved in this. We have a good team together. I'm going to take 5% of the company, so I'm in on this. Then they say, well, because you're in, I'm in, right? Mm-hmm. Because I trust you. I don't know anything about real Mexican food. To me, Chi-Chi's was Mexican food. So I'm going to trust you that you know what you're talking about, right? And so those types of relationships need to happen with people who can vet this. And part of that is effort. Part of this is about making money. Part of this is the $1 trillion markets that we just talked about. There's all this opportunity. And again, this isn't about segregation. This isn't about separating things. This is about, imagine across the street. I guarantee you, if you put here in Phoenix, the American Taco Shop in a Chipotle style way across the street from a Chipotle, it would kick Chipotle's ass every single time.
Yeah.
Every time. So it's not about segregation. It's about building things that are better, that people are going to resonate with. They're going to want authentic, right? They're going to want the products and services that are out there that meet the demand that these segments have.
You know, it's funny. Some of the questions that were raised as I was inviting people to tune in and having the discussion, it's from the description. They thought, or maybe just from their own reading of it, they thought that it was going to be forced, right? We have to build these guys and bring these other guys down. Where you're talking about, it's still capitalism.
It's all
if it works, it works. If it doesn't, we'll move on to the next idea,
right?
Which makes sense. And I think there are a lot of people that want in and can buy into this idea.
Sure.
So other than you, who else is doing this? Individuals, organizations?
Well, there's a number of organizations out there. There are some investors that are investing in education companies that are run by minorities. There's other kind of incubators that are looking for minority-run businesses. It's happening a lot more given the social justice issues, right? That are come up. And again, I think we're at the beginning of this. We don't have to solve this right now. We have to be aware. Let's just build awareness right now that this is an issue. I always like to say that the pandemic is the greatest thing that happened to education. And no, in all honesty, Donald Trump is the greatest thing that happened to social justice. It's an awareness that we have now, where if I came to you, and this is a true story. If I came to you, not you, but a general you, in 2010, and I said, "Hey, listen, I think I was discriminated against at work. It was pretty bad." That you person would say, "What? Come on, what are you talking about? There's no more racism. Look who's in the White House. Look, did you see who's in the White House?" Those are the old days. Look where you work. You work at Google. You think you'd get a job at Google if there was still racism out there? And you think that if there was discrimination, you would even be there? Like that was the argument. Now, if I say, "Hey, I think I was discriminated against at work," your answer might be, "Yeah, probably," right? Like we have an awareness of it now. We understand what's going on. And that's a good thing. There's an awareness. And all I'm saying is my only argument is basically, cool, you're aware. Now, help us create opportunities and then, get out of the way. We don't need you to open up forums to speak. We don't need empowerment, right? Like, those words to me mean that you have power and you're granting me something. I don't need capitalism. I don't need you to grant me anything. I just need opportunity.
Your permission. Yeah.
Yeah.
So in 5 years, when we're talking about this again, right, when we have you back on the show to talk about this, the next webinar, and this is working, right? People like you, other organizations, actually building something.
Right.
And then here comes corporate America because they see that it's working. They want in. How does that work?
They buy the companies. They integrate they integrate the ideas. There's lots of ways that this works, right?
And make them vanilla again. I mean, is there a world where it can coexist?
I think there's a world where it can coexist because of the market segments, right? Of what you see. Again, what is the Latino version, Latinx version of Whole Foods, right? Like, where can you go to Whole Foods and make authentic Mexican meals out of that, right? And so that's what I'm talking about. And so you start one of those Whole Foods for Latinas, and then Amazon says, "Wait a second, that store's got a lot of people in it. Let's buy that store," and they just leave it alone. They just own it, right? Like there's ways that this could happen like that, where it's not just the old way of I think that business model is kind of done, which is you take, like PepsiCo takes a company, brings it in and puts its Pepsi on it. I think now they just let them be independent, right? When the ownership happens, like there's definitely integration in those things, but they let those companies run themselves. And I think you'll see more of that.
For the entrepreneur, for the student that's listening in right now, right, live or after it's recorded, what advice do you have? What can they do that's going to make the biggest impact right away?
Yeah, again, it's what's the problem that you're trying to solve, right? If it doesn't have to be a social problem, it can be anything, right? You watch Shark Tank, every person who walks in that tank is solving a problem. Usually they're solving a problem that you don't even know about.
Yep.
Try to solve a problem for your community, whether that's a social problem or a business problem. What's missing in your community? Don't assume that you have to build something for the masses, because it's not going to get traction if you only build it in Spanish or you only build it for African Americans. These are $1 trillion markets. Build it and let capitalism drive it.
It sounds very doable, right? I mean, it feels like it's so overwhelming. Where do we even start? There's so many problems. There's so many obstacles. There are deeper pockets elsewhere. Competition is fierce. But it can be done. I mean, we've seen it done, right? I mean, it's happening right now in the corner with the mom and pop Mexican place or Cuban place. Sure. That's succeeding.
Yeah. And this isn't about like small businesses either. These are about like ideas that can get to $1 billion companies. I like comedy. I watch comedians, and my wife, who is not Spanish or African American, she's white. When we sit down and watch George Lopez, I laugh through the whole thing, and she has no idea why it's funny. Right? And so that you live in that culture, that's your world, that's where you are, right? What are the problems in those worlds? What are the product problems in those worlds? What are the social problems in those worlds? Go solve those problems. And don't worry about the fact that it doesn't reach the masses. Don't worry about the fact that it only reaches one segment. Go solve that problem the way you want to solve it. And that's the important element to this, right? It's your flavor on it. It's your, like, even a social, if you said, I want to solve climate change, then, somebody might say to you, oh, climate change, you have to go be a scientist. You have to go get a degree in global sustainable development. You have to go X, right? You have to go do this, environmental studies. But, I'm a photographer. What if I was a brilliant photographer? I was 18 years old and a brilliant photographer, a brilliant storyteller through photography. And the way I saw climate change is by going out and documenting climate change and talking about climate change in my community and what the impact is. What if I'm trying to, climate change is one of those things that you have to convince lots of people. Who's convincing the Latino market about climate change and what's going on there, right? Taking a save the planet and just putting Spanish words on it doesn't make it a Spanish campaign, right? So that's my point, is that there's lots of ways to solve problems and lots of different ways in communities that face these problems. So how do we solve problems using the skills that we have, using the talents that we have, the gifts that we have?
And you kind of alluded to this earlier. The barrier of entry to any of this is very, very low now more than ever, right? I mean, you need a laptop, a smartphone, and you can kind of go do a lot of these things.
Right. You need the opportunity, you need the skills, and you need the opportunity, right? And so, I think those are out there. It's just, to say, let's segment for a while and see what happens. Let's just focus on other people for a while and see if we can integrate a little bit more after that, right? This idea that we're separating people because we have this crazy idea of, building products and services for $1 trillion markets is insane. Yeah, right? Like, could you imagine someone going to an executive of a big multi-billion-dollar company and say, I have an idea. I came up with an idea that's going to target the Mexican market and it's going to kill. Right? You think that executive would be like, no, that's their community. Let them build it for their community, right? No, they're going to go build it, right? And so these ideas can come from anywhere. It doesn't make it a segregation issue. It makes it an integration issue because you can integrate it into current things. The one of the best business stories is the what's the fire flaming Dorito? I don't know what's it called. You've heard that story,
flaming hot Doritos or
red hot. Yeah. The story behind that, right? About the VP.
It was a janitor.
He's a janitor who took the extra chips home. His grandmother or mother, someone put their flavor on it, and he brought them to work. And all the execs were like, "What the hell is this?" That's what I'm talking about.
Flaming hot Cheetos.
Yeah, flaming hot Cheetos, the Mexican style ones.
That's right, the good stuff.
Right. That's what I'm talking about. Right. Like, why can't that guy have had that idea before? You know, sourcing chips isn't that hard to do, right? If he had a little funding, yeah, he wouldn't have become a VP at Frito-Lay's. He would have become a billionaire because Frito-Lay's would have bought his company.
I love it. You know, in a year where it's been a difficult year for a lot of people, right? Not just with COVID, but with civil unrest and everything that's going on. There's, even with all this craziness, there's still a lot of opportunity out there. Again, I think more than ever. And now it's just a time to, like you said, figure out what's the problem. Can you fix it? Can you put your own spin on it, your own flavor on it? And let's go. And you know, more organizations like you, Jaime, and companies out there that hopefully are going to continue to grow to, again, we don't want to use the word empower, but maybe help and support a lot these ideas.
I like to say provide opportunity.
Provide opportunity. Yeah, I love it. Any final questions, Lee, before we wrap this up?
I think I just wanted to underscore the idea of narrow casting, or at least thinking in terms of community, that a lot of people may have a new idea and think that this has to appeal to everyone. And that's probably the surest route to failure.
Right.
You really want the early adopters. You want the people who are going to care about this as much as you care about it.
Right.
And that usually means thinking in pretty specific terms. Right. And that works.
Yeah. Focus on your users, and the users you know best are the ones in your backyard.
Yep.
Jaime, you've been great. This has been a great conversation. Again, it's been a tough year, kind of a down year for a lot of us. This brings people a lot of hope, I think. Those that are listening, those are going to watch the replay. Thank you for being with us and making it seem like obviously it's very, very possible for every community, every individual to kind of get up there and do something better.
Yeah. Thanks for having me. Feel free. You can reach out to me on LinkedIn. My message button is open, and I'm producing and putting together a bunch of YouTube videos on my channel about career advice, and not career. I don't even like the word career, but like, you know, work advice. As a matter of fact, there's 2 videos on how to reach out to people on LinkedIn because everyone is terrible at it, right? So lots of stuff out there coming and still coming up soon.
Yeah, you're not slowing down. You kind of, you took a little break, but now you're back, and it looks like you're 100% in. So congrats.
I'm in. It wasn't even a break. It was just a regrouping, which is actually harder to do sometimes than actually taking a break.
Yeah.
Nice. We love it.
Yeah.
Lee, Jaime, you guys have been great. We'll talk soon. Those that are listening, again, we're going to have links to Jaime's social media accounts, YouTube channel, all that good stuff. Reach out to him, say hello, follow him. He's going to continue to do this and do it at a high level. So Jaime, Lee, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.